Drybrush or dry brush? A little while ago I was painting a model, and off cam I discovered something about it that I thought I wanted to try today. Now, it's something I've never done before, and I want to apply it large scale, but I don't know if it's going to work. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to go over how to do a regular dry brush, and then afterwards, see if I can make my little trick work. The models I'm going to be using in this technique today are the Alien Hives Synapse floaters from One Page Rules. Their brain parts and rough bodies will make perfect surfaces to try these techniques out on, and allow for lots of color options since there's nothing that needs to be any specific color. Now for dry brushing you want the right brush, and you probably don't want to be using your $12 to $18 sable brush for it. And so while there are professional dry brushes on the market, these ones I picked up at a dollar store for really cheap. It was just in their makeup aisle. And they've served me really well. For a dry brush, what you want is a soft bristle, and a lot of them if you're doing a large area. A rounded tip really helps, and it can be flat as well. I've done some dry brushing with these filbert brushes, and I find I get good effect with them. To start things off, I want to get a nice base coat of my main colors onto it. I'm using some of the darker shades here of red, purple, and green. There's a major reason why I'm choosing these colors that will be revealed later, but I do have a plan with where each of them is going. For the green, I'm going to base coat most of it in this, but leave the brain, the face tentacles, and the lower half of the tail alone. I also want to do 2 coats of this since it's going over a lighter primer layer. As you can see, it went on quite light the first coat. Though the grooves of the model and its heavy texture show how great of a candidate it would be for washing as well. But for me, I want this green as dark as I can get it, since it's going to be my base layer for the highlights that will be dry brushed over it. For the purple, I'll be painting the face worms and the base of his tail in that. The same way, 2 thin coats to make it dark. I'm using purple here because I want it to be harmonious with the green, as it's really just tone shifting those parts, as they're technically still made of the same alien flesh the rest of it is. But if I did just green and red, then it'd probably feel like a Christmas alien. For the red, I'm actually going to be mixing it with some of the green and purple to darken it. Red and green are opposites on the color wheel, making them complementary colors. What that means in practice for color mixing is that when you want to darken a color without a black, you add the opposing color. Because red and yellow and blue are our primaries, what you're doing by adding green to the red is adding the missing blue and yellow. When you add all 3 primaries together, in paint form, you get black. Try blue next time you want to darken orange, and even yellow will desaturate a purple as you can see here. The one with yellow in it looks a little more muddy compared to the vibrant and pure violet pigment. Now that I've got that mix and explained it a bit, time to just get it on the model in 2 thin coats. As for why I'm darkening my red, it's because I want the final product to be red, and a pure red is always going to be your brightest red. Anything else is pink or orange. So I need it darker to contrast against the pure red dry brush. When people start dry brushing, the tendency is to use white in order to lighten up your colors, but what that's going to do is leave it kind of dusty looking, which you don't want. What we can do instead is change hue. So instead of going lighter, we go to a different color. So in our case, a green is going to go to yellow, a purple is going to go to a blue, and well, our red is still going to just go to red. The 2 key pieces we need now is the dry brush and also a tough textured paper towel, as well as a large normal brush for palette mixing and transfer. So for the green, I'm going to start with the base and mix in some of the yellow, only about a 50-50 for now. Then, because I don't want to waste paint and because the roundness of this dry brush makes it hard to dip into the paint, I transfer some of the paint from my little brush to the dry brush. Then with a paper towel, wipe a bunch of it off until you can see it painting just the texture on the paper towel. The beauty of dry brushing is you can get pretty rough and messy and still get a decent look. So for this first layer, I'm going to swirl the brush in circles all over the green parts, going over an area multiple times until the paint transfers from the brush to the model. For the tail, I'm just whisking the brush in a single direction against the green to take those paint flakes off the brush. So that's layer 1 done. Dry brushing is still a blending technique, and so you don't want to just go one and done. You want to build up those colors gradually over specific points, and you can do that very easily. What it also does is it stops that dustiness I was talking about. So to that end, I'm adding a bit more yellow to the green mix and going over it again, this time focused on all the raised edges. Then it's a process of repeating, adding more yellow, brushing it on the dry brush, taking it off the dry brush, then drawing tight circles on just my highlight points. As long as I'm always adding the yellow to my last mix, it'll never get to a pure yellow and can just stop when I'm happy. In this case, it was about 4 repetitions total, always making my circles tighter and tighter to the areas I want the brightest. For the purple, I want to transition to a blue, but I do want it to be a brighter light than the purple. So if you have a lighter blue in your paint kit, then use that. But in my case, with these paints, I have to mix a lighter blue out of some blue and white. So while I said I wasn't using white, I meant that I wasn't using white to lighten the base colors. But white's just gonna be in lighter paints. A lot of your pastel colors in the pots are a mix of white and another pigment or pigments. Once I have my base mixed with the blue, it'll be most of the same process. Get it on the brush, wipe it off the brush, and then get it on the model. Now in the case of his face tentacles, I'm a bit careful to circle them just so the purple doesn't go too far up the face, but with the lower half I get pretty wild again. For the next layer with more blue mixed in, instead of circles I whisk the brush counter to the direction of the ridges on his tail, since the goal is to get the pigment to transfer onto those ridges. The neat part about this is because my brush can't really hit the back of the tail from the angle I'm at, that part's gonna stay a dark purple, so you end up with the shadows on the shadowy side just by way of limitations by the size of your brush. The fun part about dry brushing is you can end up with colors transitioning into each other. Here for example I got some green on the red parts, and it looks kinda nice, so I'm gonna try and keep that around as I do the red. For the red, it's just going to be the base red, but in a couple of passes. One general rough one to get a base down, but then another more softer application just to make sure we get that pure red. So what we end up with is a vibrant little alien floater. You can call it there for a decent tabletop standard, or first paint job, but there's some more refining we can do. In my case, I added a bit more layering to the brain on the highlights, added some purple shadows under his claw pouches, painted the pustules on his back a different color, dotted the eyes with something bright to make them stand out, and painted the claws a more claw-like color. Dry brushing tends to be considered a starter technique. It was the first one I learned some 20 years ago. I can see why. It's pretty simple to pull off on the right models and can teach the basics about blending and highlighting. Now it's true usually once someone learns layering and wet blending, they tend to favor those instead. But to me there will always be times and models where dry brushing has its place. Now that we have a baseline for how the normal technique works, I want to try using contrast for something I've been wanting to do. There's a few companies that make contrast paints now, so I figure I should try and learn about them a little bit. In my case though, I only have this one. It's a dark brown, and that's why I picked the colors that I did, because I think it'll just go better over red, green, and purple than anything else. Essentially, when I was painting the Battle Sisters for another video, these Under Armour ridges I just painted up quickly, but off camera, when I went to go highlight them, I ended up highlighting them too brightly, so did a wash of black again, and that ended up too dark. So while it was still wet, I just wiped some away. It worked, and I wanted to try that with contrast to see what kind of result I could get. For this, I'm just going to do my base coat with the airbrush. For me, it's much faster and simpler, though I'm aware not everyone has one, so a base coat like the first one I did, just using a brush, would work just the same. Getting the green in all the same areas I did for the last one. This one also doing 2 coats, though because it's a more thinned down paint for the airbrush, it will still come out a bit lighter. But that's exactly what I want in this case as well. For the airbrush version of the purple, I do the face tentacles by angling the model so the spray is never directly at the green parts. Though when it comes time to do those, I just do a quick mask using a paper towel piece and shoving it behind, so I keep the spray off his chest. Same goes for the tail, just angling it so I don't spray the body, then masking as I have to. For the red, I'm actually going to be using the pure red undarkened. Since my contrast is a dark brown, with the technique I'm going to be trying out, I'll want this to be my bright color. I'm being careful with the airbrush, using small light sprays to catch only the brain and the face, taking my time to make sure nothing sprays out too heavily. Now, fair warning, I can't really call anything past this point a tutorial, as up until now, I had no idea what was going to happen. My experience told me that straight from the pot was a bad idea though, and I mixed a bit of thinner into the contrast paint. Now to start the experiment. So the idea I had was that I'd get the contrast on as a wash, then using a dry brush, without anything on it, wipe the edges to reveal the colors that were underneath, leaving a highlight. With this first pass, what seemed to happen instead was that the paint just got wicked into the brush, and then spread out to become a more even layer. Though it did work to darken it, so it worked in that sense, it wasn't working as I had hoped. So on the opposite, I tried it without any thinner, just a small patch, and while the result was a bit better, overall, it still pretty much just got dark all over. So one more attempt, and this time on the brain, just in a small patch. The small patch though was my downfall. As I started wiping it away, I pretty much got all the middle out, but none of the sides. That could work, I thought to myself. But now I have this ring as it started drying on the edges of where I laid it out. Oh no, so I thought. Bigger area then, and covered the whole brain and tried to replicate the result. This time actually managing to wipe away a good portion of the topmost contrast. Unfortunately, that also meant in the recesses where I was trying to get it in the first place. But you know what? It still looks pretty good. Maybe that's the trick, is to cover large areas instead. His chest has plenty of texture, so that shouldn't be a problem, right? Well, it was alright, but honestly there's so much texture it already acted as a wash without my help. In for a penny, in for a pound, might as well just get it all done. I washed along his little arms and then started pulling the paint away. But then it started getting onto the part I didn't wash. However, that actually made me hopeful, as it kinda had the desired effect once it had gone all over. The more I wiped, the less it stayed on the upper ridges. So I tried again on the other side, just with a bit less, and it did the same thing. Though the more I rubbed, the more it started to take the underlayer off, too, as it dried. Another victim of my dry climate. I had one more hope, the relatively flat tail. If it was flat, I should be able to wipe it away like a spill on a countertop in a paper towel commercial, right? Well, kinda. I really didn't account for the staining power of the contrast. So no matter where it went on, it was going to leave color behind because it's stained instead of covered. But I could see that staining staying darker in the places my brush couldn't reach. So I still have hope that something like this could work with lots and lots of refinement. But as far as this experiment is concerned, still finished it though. I need something for the spin, right? So as we watch it go in circles, let's talk about what I could do for next time. Maybe if I used more appropriate colors for each part, the result might have gone better, and used a flatter brush that was less absorbent. Maybe a synthetic filbert. Those are two steps I can already think of that might make it more doable. I mean, right now the model itself isn't that bad. It could be salvaged easily by going in and picking out the highlights. But as a technique to quickly get a better result than just washing, that's what makes this a fail for now. I'll keep working at it though. So that was quite the little journey, and I learned something about a paint I barely use, but it did give me kind of that old school GW wash feel, the ones no longer available. So it is something I do want to play around with a little bit more. Please subscribe if you want to join me on other painting journeys like this, and I'll see you on the next one.